Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're going to look at Revelation 12, verses 13 through 18, continuing with these two visions of the woman about to give birth and the dragon. And those two visions become one vision. Here's verse 13. When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given two wings of a great eagle so that she could fly from the serpent's presence to her place in the wilderness, where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time. From his mouth, the serpent spewed water like a river flowing after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth helped the woman. The earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the river that the dragon had spewed from his mouth. So the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands of God and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. So it's it's just a few verses, just five verses, but there's a lot that goes on and a lot of questions come up. Like, what's with the two wings of the great eagle? What's with this flood and this serpent spewing water like a river? And then the earth opening up to swallow the river spewed out by the dragon. Like, why is the earth suddenly becoming animate like this? Let's work our way backwards through it because this is how it goes down in the end. Um, and then I can't help but let my own personal interpretation kind of show through as I try to explain verse 17. I interpret the woman to represent Israel, of whom Mary was a part. And I think this is describing the Great Tribulation, and when Israel is going to come under incredible persecution. I think that what's befalling Israel during this time is the flood that we saw in Daniel, saying that the end would come like a flood. Uh, my interpretation of the dragon, I've been pretty clear on that one. I don't even think it's even open to interpretation. I think it's the devil because the text says that it's the devil. Just read chapter 12. It even uses the devil and Satan. It gives two names for him. There can be no doubt. The dragon definitely represents Satan. And did Satan operate through Herod? Yeah, and through Judas and through the Antichrist. Uh, these two wings of a great eagle. This one's funny because I want to say it was like uh, I had just started off as a youth pastor and hadn't even enrolled in seminary yet. No, I did. It was like my first week in seminary. Um, and there was a pastor there who just like offered these DVDs with like proof that the Bible's true. And like knowing nothing yet, like not having been given any real teaching responsibilities just yet, uh, I watched it and I was like, oh wow, so that's what those two eagles' wings are. Uh, he conveyed it to the United States military discovering uh, the death camps in World War II, like members of Easy Company of the 101st Airborne coming upon the Jewish death camps, and then I want to say he reckoned this time, times, and half a time with somehow the amount of time that went by between like the discovery of the death camps and the establishment of Jerusalem of Israel in May 14th, 1948. But I don't think that was a full 3.5 years. So like time, times, and half a time. I look at this and having studied Daniel, I see that as three and a half, half of the total seven. And so that didn't quite add up to me, but I did see where he was coming from. I think that he did, I don't think he treated Revelation 12 quite accurately, but the other content that I recall from that DVD was that, like, yeah, he was treating Ezekiel properly, just describing the nation of Israel coming back from the Valley of Dry Bones. I could see that. I can see. I could see that. But here's what I think these eagles' wings are. Um, I'm a huge patriot, and I've been showing my son. Uh, there's only like one. There's only like one sexually inappropriate scene in all of Band of Brothers that I can recall, And actually, it happens, I think, in the same episode that they discovered the death camps. There's only one thing I had to fast forward through. I think that my son's, he's about to start driving. It's time for him to be old enough to understand what happens in war. And so we watch Band of Brothers, and we use it all the time. Uh, we have these archetypes in our vocabulary. Same thing happened when my dad and brother and I first watched it when it first came out. My brother had HBO, and so we would go to his house at like 9 o'clock on whatever night of the week that was, and that was like a ritual for us when he had just gotten married and got his first house, and it was really cool. And so it became a part of our vernacular. Like, I mean, men in my family will use the names Spears and Winners regularly, and Sobel in a bad way, and Lieutenant Dyke is a bad thing. Like, you don't want to be a Lieutenant Dyke. You don't want to be a Sobel. You want to be like Winners. Sometimes you want to be like Spears, and sometimes I'm told I'm a bit too much like Spears. So if those of you who are Band of Brothers fans are like, yeah, and then the rest of you guys are totally lost on this, I'll bring it back to the text so you know what I'm talking about. I loved the idea that this would be a prophecy about the U.S. And to be fair, the Allied forces, but I mean, come on, Easy Company was at the forefront of everything, coming to the rescue of Israel, and that's a cool thought. I get where they're coming from, but this is what uh, this is what we've seen Bible wide from eagles and their wings and what they represent. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his own inheritance. He found him in a desolate land, in a barren, howling wilderness. He surrounded him, cared for him, and protected him as the pupil of his eye. He watches over his nest like an eagle. He hovers over his young. He spreads his wings, catches him, and carries him on his feathers. The Lord alone led him with no help from a foreign God. Psalm 91, the very passage that came up in a recent devotion, this is what Satan tried to eisegete from in tempting Jesus. He will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. And then Isaiah 40, verse 31. Those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. And so what I hope to show here is that this is ultimately, this deliverance is from the Lord. And the idea of an eagle's wings has a biblical basis that's well established. I think that Revelation is best interpreted through the lens of Old Testament language, because all that imagery comes back here. And the flood, as I said before, I think this refers to the end that comes like a flood. I think we're seeing the nations surrounding Israel. I think that the battle of Gog and Magog, if you interpret that as not just one event that happens, in the book of Ezekiel, but that it also describes end times prophecy. It describes the ending coming on like a flood, and they're surrounding Israel, but then the earth helping the woman, right? If you interpret the woman to be the New Testament church, first of all, you got to answer why she's pregnant. And then also, I see where you're coming from, but you've got to explain the distinction here in verse 17. If you believe that the woman represents the New Testament church, the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring. See, this to me is another indicator that it's not just those of Jewish descent from the 12 tribes of Israel who are Christians who are being pursued. It's also those who keep the commands of God and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. It's Gentile Christians alive on the tortured earth during those days. So it's not just her offspring. See Romans chapter 9, which I think I read the entire chapter in its completion in last week's sermon. It's also those who can keep the commands of God, hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. The devil is furious and is waging war, not just against those from Israel, but also anyone who professes Christ. And so it leaves the interpretation that the woman represents the New Testament church just leaves you to kind of an awkward interpretation of verse 17, that it's not just the woman. It's also, I guess, the first generation of those evangelized, perhaps. I'm trying to give a fair shake to a biblical view that I don't hold myself, but one with whom I could respectfully disagree. So I would imagine that those who interpret the woman to represent the New Testament church uh, interpret this to mean like the first generation of evangelistic fruit from the New Testament church on the earth in those days. But to me, verse 17 makes more sense, viewing the woman as saved Israel, and in Israel being the nation from whom Mary came. It's the parallels. Uh, so the dragon has been thrown down to earth. Again, this kind of builds on. Do you think that the casting down of Satan to the earth is referred to in Revelation 12 only as a primordial event? Or is this describing something else in which he's no longer allowed to act as the accuser of the brethren? It's really, by the way, what diabolos means, the accuser. So be careful if you go around accusing people. You're acting like the devil. Right? You're literally an acting devil. That's what his name means, the accuser, the accuser of the Christians. So the devil has been thrown down. One interpretation of this is that it's primordial, and then the other one is that this is not only has Satan fallen in the first place, that he became Lucifer, but like that he became the devil, but also he's no longer going to be allowed to do what he does in Job 1:1-6. He's no longer going to be able to do what he did according to Jesus in Matthew 8, and that is ask God for permission to sift Peter like wheat. He's no longer going to be able to present himself before God along with the angels, as we see in Scripture. So those are the two interpretations. One is just strictly primordial, which means this is kind of a flashback. That guy that I met that first week of seminary who gave me this DVD was kind of positing a partial preterist view of the book of Revelation, particularly in chapter 12. He was saying that this is not a description of future events. This is a description of events that have already happened. And I get that. I refer to those as like the J.J. Abrams flashbacks. The director J.J. Abrams likes to do that. Throw a flashback in to give you context on a character, and then go back, like start the episode off in medias res, and there's somebody facing some great peril, and then we cut immediately to a flashback of like that character as a child, and then we come back to that scene and we understand why that character's acting the way he's acting. So I get that. If there are some people who take a partial preterist view of Revelation, particularly Revelation 12, and it's because they're looking at this and they're like, well, I know when the dragon was thrown down to earth, I mean, that's before Adam and Eve got there. That's why the serpent was in Eden. And that's what I think everybody really believes, but it's not, it doesn't preclude the possibility that this is also describing Satan no longer being allowed to ask for extended parameters, within which he can attack people. And now we're getting set up for the millennial reign of Christ, right? So we're approaching that pretty quickly. In the text of Revelation, he's attacking people because of their testimony of Jesus. There can be no doubt that these are Christians, those who keep the commands of God. That's a great way to know if the person you're looking at is a Christian. Do they live in accordance with God's commands? Right? And if they should fall short, do they repent right away? These are definitely Christians. So this is one thing that everybody, whether you're a partial preterist when it comes to chapter 12, you're post-millennialist and pre-tribulationists, we all agree. We're talking about Christians here. And the dragon is waging war against people who hold firmly to their testimony about Jesus. It's not often that a singular verse in Revelation can be taken and look at that, and we all agree, we know what it's talking about. The devil hates your testimony, and he hates that you're holding to it, and you're holding firmly to it. These two words necessarily indicate trial, and that's a no-brainer here in the time of the Great Tribulation. But it's that you have this testimony, this story about how Jesus has changed your life, and you hold on to it, and you're stubborn about it, because even when it comes into question, even when the devil gives you reason to doubt, even when stuff happens that shakes your faith, you still hold firmly to it. And even when you're isolated and alone, you suffer consequences, be they professional or social or financial even. If you face real persecution and you still hold on to that testimony of your faith, if your very life is threatened from you and you still hold fast to your faith, and if that life is taken from you with your last breath, you still hold firmly to this testimony about Jesus, I find that beautiful and compelling and amazing. You overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. And that's incredible to behold, but the devil hates that. He can't stand that. He hates that. He hates the one who gave you that testimony, and he hates the way that you hold firmly to it. And he's waging war, particularly in this passage that I believe describes the Great Tribulation. He's going after Christians. He's going after people who hold firmly to their testimony about Jesus. So be prepared for that. As spoiled Americans, we can hold fast to our testimony about Jesus. And I'm speaking even from like the most liberal city in the U.S. probably. I'm able to hold firmly to my testimony about Jesus. And I really haven't made, compared to the millennia of Christians that have come before me, I really find myself, even in one of the most lost cities in the U.S., in a better position than the vast majority, of early Christians, for example. The devil hates us. He wages war against us, but we will hold firmly to our testimony about Jesus, knowing that we're not in the Great Tribulation right now. If by some crazy chance you are watching this from the Great Tribulation, then overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. Love that testimony more than you love your own life, and then find yourself rewarded with a white robe, right? And in the presence of Jesus. What a beautiful testimony to have. But in the meantime, for the vast majority, of people who would stumble upon this video, hold firm to your testimony about Jesus, even though the devil hates it and wages war against it. Behold, this passage tells of God's deliverance of his people from such trial and difficulty. He is sovereign and on the throne, even as the devil is raging. We've just finished a verse that says that he knows his time is short. And so he's trying to wreak as much havoc as he possibly can in the time that he has left. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. The devil hates your testimony, but Jesus loves it because he's the one who wrote it.